It's not about looks. It's not about money. And it's definitely not about trying harder. Because in reality, most men are rejected for one simple reason. They don't understand how attraction actually works at a psychological level. Some men walk into a room and instantly shift the energy. They don't chase. They don't beg. They don't overtry. And yet, they are chosen, while others do everything right and still get ignored. Why? Because attraction is not logical. It is emotional, psychological, and deeply rooted in presence, energy, and self-control. The Stoics understood something most people still miss today. You don't become attractive by chasing attention. You become attractive by mastering yourself. In this video, you'll discover 15 Stoic-based psychological truths that explain why some men are naturally chosen, while others are instantly rejected. And if you stay until the end, you'll understand how to completely shift how people perceive your presence without forcing anything. Let's begin. 1. Energy speaks before words. Before you even speak, people already feel you. Your posture, your calmness, your confidence, your nervousness, everything sends signals. And those signals decide how you are perceived. The Stoics believe that presence is stronger than persuasion, because you cannot fake energy for long. If you are anxious inside, it shows. If you are desperate for approval, it shows. If you are grounded and calm, that shows too. And attraction begins there, not in words, but in energy. This is why some men don't need to say much, yet still command attention. They are not performing. They are simply being themselves without fear. Start observing this. When you enter a space, do you feel like you are being evaluated? Or do you feel like you belong there already? That internal state changes everything. Because people don't respond to what you say. They respond to what you radiate. And most people underestimate this. They focus on appearance, jokes, or conversation skills, but forget the foundation. Your internal state is your real attraction signal. And once you understand this, everything changes. But here's the deeper truth. Energy alone is not enough. Because even confident energy can be destroyed by one thing: neediness. And that leads to the next lesson. Continue, and I'll take you to point 2. Why neediness destroys attraction instantly. This is where most men lose value without realizing it. Brain 2. Neediness kills attraction instantly. Nothing destroys attraction faster than neediness. Not your looks, not your background, not your status, but the feeling that you need approval from someone else to feel okay. Because attraction is built on a strange psychological rule. The more you chase, the less you are valued. The more you detach, the more you are noticed. Stoicism teaches a powerful principle here. You cannot control how others perceive you, but you can control how dependent you are on their perception. And that difference is everything. A needy man is always leaking energy. He overtexts. He overexplains. He tries too hard to be liked. He reacts emotionally to small things. And without realizing it, he is communicating one message: I don't feel complete without your approval. That energy is heavy. It creates pressure, and pressure kills attraction. Now contrast that with a grounded man. He is calm. He is present. He is not rushing outcomes. He is not trying to force connection. He enjoys interaction, but he doesn't depend on it. That difference is felt instantly, because people don't just evaluate your words. They evaluate your emotional independence. And here is the uncomfortable truth most men don't want to hear. You can say all the right things, but if your energy says, I need you, it overrides everything. Stoicism trains you to remove that dependency, not by becoming cold, but by becoming whole on your own. When you are not emotionally dependent on outcomes, you stop chasing validation. You stop forcing conversations. You stop fearing rejection. You stop over-investing too early. And ironically, that is when you become more attractive. Because now, your presence feels safe, stable, and grounded. And people naturally lean toward that. But here's where it goes deeper. Most men think they are confident, but they are actually just performing confidence while still emotionally attached to outcomes. and that attachment shows up in subtle ways, which leads to the next truth. 3. Emotional control creates respect before attraction. Attraction may start the interaction, but emotional control decides your value. A man who cannot control his emotions becomes predictable, and predictability kills mystery, and mystery fuels attraction. Stoicism teaches that emotions are not enemies, but they must be governed, not followed blindly. Because the average reactionary man behaves like this. He gets ignored, he becomes frustrated. He feels slight tension, he becomes reactive. He hears no, he becomes defensive. He feels uncertainty, he becomes anxious. And all of this is visible, even without words. Now compare that to a man who is emotionally disciplined. He doesn't rush reactions. He doesn't get emotionally pulled into every situation. He pauses before responding. He stays calm under pressure. That calmness creates something powerful. Respect before familiarity. Because emotional stability signals strength. And strength is universally attractive. Not just physically, but psychologically. But here's the deeper layer. Women, like all humans, subconsciously test emotional stability early. Not through obvious tests, but through small behaviors. Delayed responses, subtle distance, slight unpredictability, and the reaction reveals everything. A man who reacts emotionally fails instantly. A man who stays composed signals, I am not easily disturbed. And that creates intrigue, because stability is rare. Most people are emotionally reactive in today's world, quick to respond, quick to panic, quick to chase. So when someone doesn't react, it stands out. And that standing out is where attraction begins to form. But there is something even deeper than emotional control. Because control alone is not enough. If your identity is weak, even control will look like performance. And that leads us to the next Stoic truth. Continue, please, and I'll go into point 4. Why identity and self-worth decide who gets chosen. This is where most men either level up or stay invisible. 4. Self-worth decides who gets chosen, not performance. Most men get this completely wrong. They think attraction is about doing more effort, more attention, more proving themselves. But Stoicism reveals a harder truth. People don't choose you because of what you do. They choose you because of who you believe you are. That is self-worth, and it is silently communicated in everything you do. When a man has low self-worth, it shows in subtle ways. He tries to impress instead of express. He over-explains his value. He seeks approval before taking action. He accepts disrespect just to stay connected. And without saying it directly, he is communicating, I'm not sure I deserve better treatment. That energy influences how others respond to him. Now contrast that with a man who understands his value. He doesn't chase validation. He doesn't compete for attention. He doesn't lower his standards to be accepted. He simply knows how he should be treated and acts accordingly. And this is where attraction shifts. Because people respond strongly to self-belief. Not arrogance, not ego, but quiet internal certainty. Stoicism teaches that your worth is not decided externally. It is defined internally. And when that internal definition is strong, you walk away from what disrespects you. You don't negotiate your standards. You don't beg for emotional space. You don't overstay where you are undervalued. And ironically, that makes you more desirable. Because scarcity is not just about physical presence. It is about emotional availability tied to standards. Here's the deeper psychological truth. People treat you based on the lowest level of respect you accept. So if you accept confusion, you get confusion. If you accept inconsistency, you get inconsistency. If you accept disrespect, you get more of it. But when your self-worth is stable, you automatically filter what you allow into your life. And that filtering process changes everything. Because now, you are no longer reacting to people. You are selecting. And selection creates power. But there is another layer most men miss. Self-worth is not loud. It does not need to announce itself. It is felt through boundaries, silence, and consistency. And when combined with emotional control, it creates something rare. A man who does not chase and does not crumble. And that is where attraction begins to deepen. But now we move into something even more powerful. Because even self-worth alone is not enough if your presence is weak. And that leads us to the next Stoic truth. 5. Presence is more powerful than words. You can't talk your way into attraction, because before your words are processed, your presence is already judged. Stoics understood this deeply. A strong man does not need to over-explain himself. His presence communicates before his speech ever begins. And presence is built through alignment. Calm mind, relaxed body, controlled emotions, intentional silence, grounded energy. When these elements are aligned, something shifts in how others respond to you. You become harder to ignore, not because you are loud, but because you are stable. And stability creates curiosity. Now compare that to someone who is mentally scattered. Nervous energy, rushed speech, over-explaining, seeking reactions, filling silence with words. That energy feels unstable, and instability pushes people away unconsciously. Because the human mind seeks safety before attraction. Here is the Stoic truth. Stillness is power. When you are not trying to force impressions, you naturally stand out. You are not competing for attention. You are not performing for approval. You are simply present. And presence creates tension, not discomfort, but curiosity. Because people start asking, why is he so calm? Why isn't he reacting? What is he thinking? That curiosity is where attraction begins to grow. But there is something deeper. Presence is not something you turn on. It is something you build through discipline, through how you live daily, how you handle stress, how you respond to disrespect, how you manage silence, how you control impulses. And over time, your presence becomes your identity. But here's the key. Presence alone can still be misunderstood if your purpose is unclear. And that leads us to the next Stoic principle. Continue, and I'll go into point 6. Why purpose and direction make you instantly more attractive, and why direction beats charm every time. 6. Purpose and direction create natural attraction. Most men are not rejected because they lack charm. They are rejected because they lack direction. And direction is one of the most attractive traits a man can have. Not because it sounds good, but because it signals something deeper. Clarity, stability, focus. The Stoics lived with purpose. Every action, every decision, every habit was aligned with something greater than momentary pleasure. And that created a powerful effect. They were not easily distracted, and they were not easily controlled. Now think about this in today's world. Most people are drifting, scrolling endlessly, chasing temporary validation, reacting instead of building. And when a man enters that environment with clear direction, he stands out instantly, not because he is trying to impress, but because he is not lost. That's rare, and rarity creates attraction. Here's the deeper psychological truth. When you have purpose, your attention becomes selective. You don't give your time to everything. You don't chase every interaction. You don't overinvest in people too quickly, because your life is already moving forward. And this creates something powerful. Non-neediness through focus. You are not avoiding people. You are just not dependent on them. And that changes everything. Because now, your presence feels different. You're not trying to fill a void. You're not trying to escape boredom. You're not trying to prove your worth. You are already engaged in your own path. And people can feel that. They feel when someone has direction. They feel when someone is building something. They feel when someone is not easily distracted. And that feeling creates respect, which often comes before attraction. But here's where most men go wrong. They try to pretend they have purpose. They talk about goals. They talk about plans. But their actions don't match. And that inconsistency breaks the illusion. Because attraction is not built on words. It is built on patterns. The Stoics focused on consistency over performance. Not what you say, but what you repeatedly do. So if you want to build real attraction, focus on your life first. Build something. Improve daily. Stay disciplined. And let that naturally shape your presence. Because when your life has direction, you don't need to chase attention. Attention starts coming to you. But there's a deeper layer most people miss. Even with purpose, if you are too available, you still lose value. And that leads us to the next Stoic truth. Continue watching, and I'll take you to point 7. Why being too available destroys attraction. This is where most men unknowingly lower their value. 7. Too much availability destroys your value. The more available you are, the less you are valued. It sounds simple, but this is where most men quietly lose attraction without realizing it. You reply instantly. You cancel your plans. You adjust your schedule. You make yourself constantly accessible. And in your mind, it feels like effort. But in reality, it communicates something else. I don't have anything more important than this. And that lowers your perceived value immediately. The Stoics lived differently. They valued their time above everything. Because they understood, time is not just time. It is life itself. So they didn't give it away easily. Not out of ego, but out of discipline. And that discipline created something powerful. Selective availability. Now here's the psychological truth. People value what feels limited, not what is always there, not what is always accessible, not what requires no effort to reach. Scarcity creates attention. Availability kills it. This doesn't mean playing games. It means living a life that naturally limits your availability. Because you are focused, because you are building, because your time has structure. So instead of forcing distance, you create it naturally. Now compare two scenarios. Man A is always available, replies instantly, always says yes, always adjusts his life. Man B is focused, responds when he has time, keeps his schedule, doesn't drop everything. Who feels more valuable? Not because one is better, but because one has boundaries with his time. And boundaries create respect. The Stoics didn't chase attention. They controlled their time, their focus, their energy, and that made their presence feel rare. Here's what you must understand. Being unavailable is not about ignoring people. It's about not abandoning yourself. Because every time you drop your priorities for someone else, you send a message. My time is not important. And people mirror that. Start applying this immediately. Don't respond instantly to everything. Don't cancel your plans to please others. Don't make yourself constantly accessible. Prioritize your life first. And something powerful will happen. Your presence becomes less predictable, more intentional, more respected. Because now, access to you is not guaranteed. And access is what creates value. But here's the deeper layer. Even if you control your availability, if you are still chasing validation internally, you will still lose your power. And that leads us to the next Stoic truth. Keep watching, and I'll take you to point 8. Why detachment is more attractive than desire. This is where real power begins. 8. Detachment is more attractive than desire. The more you need something to happen, the less likely it is to happen. That's the paradox most people never understand. Desire, when uncontrolled, turns into pressure, and pressure pushes people away. But detachment creates space, and space creates attraction. The Stoics practiced detachment not because they didn't care, but because they refused to be controlled by outcomes. They understood this powerful truth. You can desire something without depending on it, and that difference is everything. Most men approach interactions with hidden expectations. I hope this works. I hope she likes me. I hope this leads somewhere. And even if they don't say it, that expectation leaks into their behavior. They overthink. They try too hard. They become reactive. They lose composure. All because they are attached to an outcome. Now compare that to a man who is detached. He enjoys the moment. He engages naturally. He doesn't force results. He is okay with any outcome. That energy feels completely different. Because there is no pressure. And when there is no pressure, people feel free. And when people feel free, they are more open. This is where attraction grows naturally. Not forced, not chased, but allowed. Here's the deeper psychological layer. When you are detached, you subconsciously communicate, I am already complete. And that is powerful. Because people are drawn to those who are not seeking to be completed. They are drawn to stability, to emotional independence, to grounded presence. Detachment is not indifference. It's calm confidence. It's saying, I like this interaction, but I don't need it to validate me. And that creates a subtle tension. Because now, instead of chasing, you are choosing. And choice creates power. The Stoics mastered this. They trained themselves to accept any outcome. Not passively, but with control. Because when you are prepared to walk away, you are no longer controlled. And when you are no longer controlled, you become more attractive. But here's where it gets deeper. Detachment without standards becomes indifference. And indifference alone is not attractive. Because people are not drawn to emptiness. They are drawn to standards. And that leads to the next Stoic truth. Continue, please, and I'll take you to point 9. Why standards make you instantly more desirable. This is where respect turns into attraction. 9. Standards create attraction, not effort. Most men try to increase attraction by doing more. More texting, more compliments, more effort. But the truth is the opposite. Attraction is not built by increasing effort. It is built by increasing standards. Because standards define how you live, what you accept, and what you walk away from. The Stoics lived by strict internal standards, not to impress others, but to stay aligned with themselves. And that alignment created something powerful. Consistency. Now here's the psychological truth. People don't respect someone who accepts everything. They respect someone who chooses carefully. Because choice signals value. When you have no standards, you accept any behavior. You tolerate inconsistency. You stay even when disrespected. You adapt yourself to fit others. And over time, you lose your position. Because you become predictable and easy to keep around without effort. But when you have standards, you don't entertain disrespect. You don't tolerate confusion. You don't chase unclear situations. You walk away when necessary. That behavior creates tension. Not negative tension, but respect-based tension. Because now, your presence is not guaranteed. And when something is not guaranteed, it becomes more valuable. Here's the deeper layer. Standards are not about controlling others. They are about controlling yourself. What you allow, what you engage with, what you invest your time and energy into. And once your standards are clear, your decisions become easier. You don't overthink. You don't chase clarity. You don't negotiate your worth. You simply observe and decide. The Stoics believe that self-respect is built through action, not words. So if you say you have standards, but don't enforce them, they mean nothing. Because people don't respond to what you say. They respond to what you consistently tolerate. Start applying this immediately. If something feels off, don't ignore it. If behavior is inconsistent, step back. If respect is missing, remove access. No drama, no emotional reaction, just quiet decision. And that quiet decision creates power. Because now, you are not trying to be chosen. You are choosing. And that shift changes everything. But here's the deeper truth. Even with standards, if you are still trying to impress, you will still lose your position. Because attraction is not built on impressing. It's built on authenticity. And that leads us to the next Stoic principle. Hope you're still with us, and I'll take you to point 10. Why trying to impress always backfires. This is where most men unknowingly lose attraction. 10. Trying to impress always backfires. The moment you try to impress, you position yourself below. That's the part most people don't realize. Because impressing is not neutral. It carries a hidden message. I need you to see my value. And the moment that need is felt, your value drops. The Stoics never tried to impress. They focused on something far more powerful. Being aligned with who they are, without seeking approval. Because when you are grounded in yourself, you don't need to perform. But most men fall into this trap. They try to say the right things. They try to act confident. They try to show status, humor, intelligence. And in doing so, they lose authenticity. Because now, they are not expressing themselves. They are presenting a version of themselves for approval. And that creates tension. Not attractive tension, but uncomfortable pressure, because the other person can feel it. This person is trying to win me over. And when someone feels like they are being won over, they naturally step back. Now compare that to someone who is authentic. He doesn't try to impress. He doesn't filter himself excessively. He doesn't perform for reactions. He simply expresses himself, calmly and confidently. That energy feels real, and realness is rare. Here's the deeper psychological truth. People are not attracted to perfection. They are attracted to certainty. Not certainty in outcomes, but certainty in identity. When you are certain about who you are, you don't overthink what to say. You don't chase reactions. You don't adjust yourself constantly. You don't fear small rejections, because your identity is stable, and that stability removes the need to impress. The Stoics trained this through self-awareness. They didn't try to be liked by everyone. They focused on living according to their principles, and that created something powerful: consistency between who they are and how they show up. And that consistency builds trust. Trust leads to comfort. Comfort leads to openness. And openness allows attraction to grow. But here's where it goes deeper. When you stop trying to impress, you naturally become more selective. And that selectiveness shifts your entire position. Because now, you are not trying to be chosen. You are evaluating. And that is where real power begins. But there's another layer most men completely miss. 11. Silence is more attractive than talking too much. The more you talk, the more you reveal. The more you reveal, the less mystery remains. And when mystery disappears, attraction begins to fade. Most men think attraction is built through constant conversation. So they talk more, explain more, fill every silence. But what they don't realize is this: talking too much weakens your presence, because it signals one thing: I need to keep this interaction alive. And that creates pressure. The Stoics understood the power of silence. They didn't speak just to fill space. They spoke with intention, because they knew silence creates tension, and tension creates attention. When you are comfortable in silence, you communicate confidence. When you are not rushing to speak, you communicate control. And when you don't feel the need to explain everything, you communicate self-assurance. Now compare two behaviors. One person talks endlessly, explains every thought, reacts instantly. The other speaks less, listens more, pauses before responding. Who feels more grounded? Who feels more in control? Who feels more attractive? Silence is not emptiness. It is presence without force. And that presence creates curiosity. Because when you don't reveal everything, people start wondering, what is he thinking? Why is he so calm? Why isn't he trying to impress me? And that curiosity pulls them in. But here's the deeper truth. Silence only works when it comes from confidence, not insecurity. Because forced silence feels awkward, but natural silence feels powerful. The difference is internal. If you are silent because you are afraid to speak, it shows. If you are silent because you are comfortable, that shows too. And people can feel the difference instantly. The Stoics trained this through discipline. They controlled their impulses, including the impulse to speak unnecessarily, because they understood not every thought needs to be expressed, not every silence needs to be filled, and not every moment requires your voice. Start practicing this. Pause before you respond. Don't rush to fill quiet moments. Let conversations breathe. Speak only when you add value. You'll notice something powerful. People start leaning in more. People listen more when you speak. People become more aware of your presence, because now your words carry weight. But here's the deeper layer. Silence alone is not enough, because even if you speak less, if your actions don't match your words, your value will still drop. And that leads to the next Stoic truth. Continue, and I'll take you to point 12. Why consistency makes you trustworthy and attractive. This is where attraction becomes stable, not temporary. 12. Consistency builds trust, and trust deepens attraction. Attraction may start with curiosity, but it is sustained by consistency. Without consistency, everything fades. You can have confidence. You can have presence. You can have strong energy. But if your behavior is unpredictable, your value becomes unstable. The Stoics understood this deeply. A disciplined man is predictable in principles, not in emotions. That means he shows up the same way over time. He doesn't shift based on mood. He doesn't act different just to impress. He doesn't disappear and reappear randomly. That stability creates something powerful: trust. And trust is what allows attraction to grow beyond the surface. Because here's the truth: people are drawn to excitement, but they stay for stability. If someone cannot predict your behavior, they cannot rely on you. And if they cannot rely on you, they cannot fully invest. Now here's where most men fail. They start strong, then become inconsistent. One day they are present. Next day they disappear. One moment they are confident. Next moment they are unsure. And that inconsistency creates confusion. Confusion breaks attraction. Because instead of feeling curiosity, people start feeling uncertainty. And uncertainty creates distance. The Stoics avoided this by living with structure. Not rigidly, but intentionally. Their actions were aligned with their identity, not their emotions. So they didn't fluctuate. They remained steady. And that steadiness creates something rare: reliability without neediness. That balance is powerful, because you are not chasing, but you are also not unpredictable. You are grounded, and grounded people feel safe to engage with. Start applying this. Be consistent in your behavior. Don't overpromise and underdeliver. Don't act differently just to impress. Align your actions with your values. Because consistency is not about perfection. It's about alignment over time. And when people feel that alignment, they begin to trust your presence. And trust is what transforms attraction from momentary into something deeper. But here's the deeper truth. Even with consistency, if you are still reacting to everything externally, you will lose your power. Because real attraction comes from something even stronger: internal control. And that leads us to the next Stoic truth. Continue, and I'll take you to point 13. Why being unbothered is extremely attractive. This is where emotional dominance shows without force. 13. Being unbothered is power, emotional control without force. The more easily you are affected, the less powerful you appear. That's the truth most people try to ignore. Because being unbothered is not about acting cold. It's about being in control of your internal state, no matter what happens externally. The Stoics trained for this, not to become emotionless, but to become unshaken, because they understood something powerful. If someone can control your emotions, they control you. And the moment someone feels they can control you, your value drops. Think about it. If a small delay in response makes you anxious, if a slight change in behavior makes you overthink, if a little distance makes you chase, then your emotional state is no longer yours. It belongs to the situation, and that creates instability. Now compare that to someone who is unbothered. He doesn't panic. He doesn't overreact. He doesn't chase clarity emotionally. He observes and stays grounded. That energy feels completely different, because it signals one thing: I am in control of myself. And self-control is rare. Most people are reactive. They respond instantly. They overanalyze everything. They get emotionally pulled into every situation. So when someone remains steady, it stands out immediately. But here's the key. Being unbothered is not about pretending, because forced indifference feels fake. Real composure comes from internal security, from knowing you are okay with any outcome. You don't need validation to feel stable. You are not dependent on external reactions. That mindset creates freedom, and freedom creates attraction. Because now, you are not reacting. You are choosing how to respond. The Stoics practiced this daily. They controlled their reactions. They paused before responding. They observed before reacting. And over time, they became difficult to disturb. And when someone is difficult to disturb, they become difficult to manipulate. That creates respect. And respect builds attraction. Start practicing this. When something triggers you, pause. When something confuses you, observe. When something feels uncertain, stay grounded. You don't need to react instantly. You don't need to solve everything emotionally. Sometimes the strongest move is calm observation. But here's the deeper truth. Being unbothered alone is not enough. Because if you don't have standards for your life, you will still accept situations that lower your value. And that leads to the next Stoic principle. Continue watching, and I'll take you to point 14. Why walking away is the ultimate power move. This is where your value becomes undeniable. 14. Walking away is power, the ultimate test of self-respect. The moment you realize you can walk away is the moment everything changes. Because most people stay too long in situations that drain them, too long with people who don't value them, too long in confusion, hoping things will improve. And in that waiting, they slowly lose their power. The Stoics lived by a simple but brutal truth. If it costs your peace, your self-respect, or your standards, it is too expensive. But walking away is hard, not because you don't see the truth, but because you are emotionally invested. You've already given time, energy, attention, and part of you hopes maybe it will change. But here's the reality. What you tolerate continues. And the longer you stay where you are undervalued, the more your presence loses weight. Because you are teaching people something silently. I will stay, even when I'm not respected. And once that is learned, it becomes your position. But the moment you walk away, without drama, without begging, without over-explaining, you send a completely different message. I value myself more than this situation. And that changes everything. Not always for them, but definitely for you. Because now, you are no longer operating from fear of loss. You are operating from self-respect. And self-respect is powerful. Here's the deeper psychological truth. People often realize your value when they lose access to you. Not because you changed, but because your presence is no longer guaranteed. And scarcity creates awareness. But this is important. Walking away is not a tactic. It is a decision. A decision based on standards, not emotions. Because if you walk away just to get a reaction, you are still attached. But if you walk away because it no longer aligns with your standards, you are free. The Stoics mastered this. They didn't cling to things that disturbed their peace. They let go, not easily, but intentionally. And that intention created strength. Start applying this. If respect is missing, step back. If consistency is absent, reduce investment. If your standards are being ignored, remove access. No anger, no explanation, just action. Because real power is quiet. And once you master this, something shifts. You stop fearing loss. You stop chasing clarity. You stop lowering yourself to stay connected. You become someone who chooses, not someone who waits to be chosen. But here's the final truth. Even if you master all of this, if you don't become disciplined within yourself, none of it will last. That's why the final point ties everything together. Hope you made it this far, and I'll take you to point 15, the final shift. Become the man who doesn't chase. This is where everything locks in permanently. 15. Become the man who doesn't chase. That's when everything changes. At the end of everything. This is the shift that changes your entire life. You stop chasing, not because you don't care, but because you've built a life you don't need to escape from. Most men chase because they feel something is missing. Validation, attention, connection, purpose. So they look outward, hoping someone else will fill that gap. But the Stoics approached life differently. They focused inward. They built themselves, mentally, emotionally, physically. And as they became stronger within, their need to chase disappeared. Because here's the truth. The man who has control over himself doesn't need to chase anything. He doesn't chase attention. He doesn't chase approval. He doesn't chase outcomes. He focuses on his path. And ironically, that's what makes him attractive. Because now, his energy is different. He is calm, not desperate. He is focused, not distracted. He is selective, not available to everything. He is grounded, not easily shaken. And that energy stands out, not because he is trying to be different, but because he is disciplined. The world is full of people reacting emotionally, chasing validation, and losing themselves in the process. So when someone shows up with control, clarity, and self-respect, it's rare, and rarity creates attraction. But this is not something you fake. It's something you build daily, through small decisions. Choosing discipline over distraction. Choosing self-respect over approval. Choosing growth over comfort. Choosing silence over unnecessary noise. And over time, something powerful happens. You stop asking, "Why am I not chosen?" Because you are no longer trying to be chosen. You are choosing your life, your standards, your direction, and that's when everything shifts. People respond differently to you. They treat you differently. They perceive you differently, not because you changed for them, but because you changed for yourself. If this video opened your eyes, don't just watch and move on, because most people will hear this, but never apply it. And that's why nothing changes for them. But you can be different. Start applying what you've learned. Control your energy. Remove neediness. Build self-worth. Stop trying to impress. Embrace silence. Stay consistent. Be unbothered. Walk away when necessary. And most importantly, stop chasing. Because the moment you stop chasing is the moment people start noticing. And if you want more videos like this, deep, real, and designed to transform how you think and move, Backhand Index Pointing Right, subscribe to the channel right now. Because the strongest version of you is built through discipline. And the question is, will you build it? Or keep chasing what you should attract? The choice is yours.